Good evening and welcome to our virtual town hall meeting for West Zone Schools. My name is Mike Zarchin and I serve as the Chief of School Climate and Safety. Thank you for joining us tonight. At this time, I would like to introduce to you our presenters. Ms. Patricia Mustafer, Coordinator of School Social Work Services, Ms. April Lewis, Executive Director of School Safety, Captain Brown, and Lieutenant Askew, Baltimore County Police Department. Dr. Adrian Morrow, Executive Director, Division of School Support and Achievement. Ms. Kyria Joseph, Executive Director, Division of School Support and Achievement. Ms. Melissa DiDonato, Executive Director, Division of School Support and Achievement, and Dr. Michael Ford, Safety Manager. In addition to my role as Chief of School Climate and Safety, I have the honor of serving as the moderator for our town hall meeting tonight. We've planned this meeting to be an opportunity for staff to respond to questions, provide information, and learn from our parents and community. We greatly appreciate you joining us. I would now like to turn it over to our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Darrell Williams, to share some welcoming remarks.
Good evening, Team BCPS. I am pleased to join you for this very important conversation about safe and supportive environments for our staff and students. I would like to begin with the Compass, our pathway to excellence, our 8-year strategic plan adopted in July of 2020. The Compass provides the clarity we need to support the academic and social-emotional wellness of each of our children. Next slide. The Compass identifies 5 priorities. First one is learning, accountability, and results. The second one is safe and supportive environment. The third is high-performing workforce and alignment of human capital. The fourth is community engagement and partnerships. And the fifth is operational excellence. This evening, we will focus on 2 key areas: safe and supportive environment and community engagement and partnerships. Safe and supportive environments set the foundation for high quality teaching and learning. We also know we need our communities as partners for this very important work. Next slide. We will continue with our efforts to recover, rebuild, and heal. While many would like it to be business as usual, this year presents unprecedented challenges. The Washington Post recently reported that this was supposed to be the back to normal school year. However, shortages in staff are creating chaos at a time when educators are already struggling with public health imperatives. The reality is that while we remain steadfast in our focus on recovery, the rebuild relies on tools and resources that are in short supply, requiring us to do things differently to meet the emerging needs of our students. Pandemic-related trauma experiences continue to manifest in an uptick of disruptive behaviors in schools. School systems across the nation are facing similar challenges as students engage in a prolonged adjustment period. I remain concerned about the safety of our students, added stress and exhaustion for our staff, and additional worries for families. We have taken several steps to mitigate these areas, and we want to support our leaders as they continue to adjust to the changing landscape. Every student deserves to be in a physical and emotionally safe and supportive environment. Baltimore County Public Schools is committed to providing access to a free education for all students. From day one, our school staff have been diligently implementing practices that promote social emotional wellness with a focus on fostering relationships, inclusivity, and wellness. We want all students to feel good about themselves, their school environments, and their ability to learn. This means all students. Chronic disruption in actions that cause imminent harm are not acceptable. Next slide. So on December 3rd, I shared with Team BCPS a list of actions and opportunities to help schools focus on teaching and learning. Those recommendations fall into 3 categories: community, resources, and accountability. Community. This town hall is a good step in building the community understanding and purpose we need to protect school safety. Tonight builds on this system-wide conversations in October and leads to ongoing and upcoming work with our PTSA leadership, student leaders, school staff, and colleagues across the state to problem solve. This is not just talk. It is the expectation that as a result of these conversations, we must take action. In terms of resources, we are committed to deploying resources to proactively manage student behavior through lessons that equip students with social-emotional skills, parent tools through Parent University, and a new staffing model that reassigns staff to high-need areas. And accountability. Lastly, when our best efforts to ensure or restore community are unsuccessful, we encourage and trust our school leaders to take steps to preserve teaching and learning. Principals have the authority to use all tools, including bus suspensions, short-term suspensions, long-term referrals for board suspension, virtual and in-person learning alternatives to ensure a safe environment for all students. Additionally, school support teams will hold staff focus groups to address identified barriers. There are no easy answers. However, we remain committed to working with all members of Team BCPS to tackle these issues. So thank you for your presence this evening. And at this time, I turn it back over to Dr. Zarchin.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Staff from the Division of School Climate and Safety work to foster safe, secure, and supportive learning and working environments for all students and staff throughout Baltimore County Public Schools. We work to coordinate multiple system-wide initiatives that support health and safety, as well as the social, emotional, and academic growth of our students. Staff responsible for leading the efforts in our division include school counselors, pupil personnel workers, school nurses, school psychologists, school safety managers, and school social workers. Additionally, BCPS enjoys a strong partnership with the Baltimore County Police Department, through which 83 school resource officers, or SROs, are funded and assigned. The key initiatives that drive the work of our division include student and staff supports, positive work and school environments and workplace climates, safe and supportive environments for learning and working, as well as emergency preparedness. For tonight's town hall meeting, we are pleased to have executive directors from the Division of School Support and Achievement, as well as our safety manager who supports the West Zone. I would now like to welcome Dr. Morrow, Mrs. Joseph, Mrs. DiDonato, and Dr. Miller, executive directors for School Support and Achievement, to share information on their role in supporting schools and fostering safe and positive learning environments.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carrie Joseph, and I am over the West Zone Secondary School, so our middle and high schools. And one of the things that we do is we do review our school safety plans. We look for ways to make sure that our building structure, our exit plans are in place, and we work very closely with our school manager, our safety manager, Dr. Ford. We also help with the school-wide positive behavior intervention plans so that they are in place and they meet the specific need of each school. Melissa?
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. I'm Melissa DiDonato. I'm one of the executive directors for West Zone Elementary Schools. I support 16 of our West Zone elementary schools, and Dr. Morrow supports the other 17. One of the other things that we work to do is try to coordinate resources from various BCPS offices to support our schools more efficiently. We often use a tiered system of support where we look at different resources from the offices at different levels of support. So does a school need ongoing support where resources might be deployed to that school on a daily basis for an extended period of time? Do they need additional professional development or coaching at their school? So what we work to do is coordinate those supports and resources and differentiate them based on the schools that we serve.
We also find that there are times where we have to use our community partners, especially when there are issues in the community. We have resources such as the community conferencing. We use this when there are families within our school who have issues outside of school and they bring those issues inside of school. And so we try to work with these partners to resolve those issues so that we have a safe and orderly environment. There are times where we need to use our mental health partnerships. And so each school has a partnership that they use and that families can actually use those resources. Adrian?
And finally, we as former principals, each of us, both Ms. DiDonato and Ms. Joseph, all were former principals, either in the elementary school or the high school environment. And so we know how important it is for us to meet with our principals or administrative teams weekly or bi-weekly to check in. We want to make sure everything is going smoothly when it comes to the work and the support at the elementary and the secondary level. We also identify needed supports and evaluate the efficacy of provided supports. And so we expect that our principals share with us what's needed at the school level for our students to be successful. We also use the suspension data, as well as the attendance data. And the biggest thing we want to share is we believe in the partnership between our community and our schools. And that's so important as we begin to develop and support our students at the elementary and the secondary level. It is so important to build a partnership with our parents, our community partners, and the school. Next slide.
Thank you, Dr. Morrow. Social emotional learning is the commitment as part of the vision of the Compass, our pathway forward, that was referenced by both Dr. Williams and Dr. Zarchin, that within every BCPS learning space, students and adults will acquire and apply social emotional skills. This ultimately contributes to the resiliency of a safe and supportive community. The information in front of you identifies how SEL is part of a tiered system of supports. To the left, the social and emotional learning framework centers equity within 3 core competencies of relationships, awareness, and decision-making. These are all essential to understanding and managing our emotions, listening, feeling, and showing empathy for others, as well as making thoughtful, responsible decisions, all of which we all seek in our communities. In the center is the multi-tiered system of supports framework, the MTSS framework, that consists of 3 tiers, with each tier adding an additional layer of support. Tier 1 offers universal supports for all students, where SEL is embedded through classroom lessons, engagement of the 3 SEL signature practices. Perhaps you would see it in circling up to establish community as part of the continuum of restorative practices, all to the greater good of promoting connection towards a sense of belonging, as we talked about earlier. Tier 2 offers early intervention supports to provide short-term interventions to support the needs that consist of, perhaps it's small groups, like mentoring, consultation, maybe referrals to community-based providers, perhaps a check-in or a check-out, impromptu conversations, and maybe problem-solving circles. At Tier 3, The intensive supports are typically individualized interventions to address specific needs that include individual services provided by a member of the student support team and can include a crisis response. The document to your far right, Connecting as a Collective Community, is BCPS's social emotional plan in alignment with the priorities and whole child approaches. This focuses on the well-being of the entire school community to explicitly incorporate SEL into academics. This resource, along with all of the information referenced in this slide, can be located on the Department of Social Emotional Support's webpage. Also there, you'll find the virtual calming room that offers space for all ages and stages to put pause and calm in oneself. There's also a link to the Mind Over Matters campaign that highlights the importance of social, emotional, and mental health awareness. SEL for all of us is the opportunity to increase individual resilience by learning and developing skills that engage and support the identification and regulation or coping of really strong emotions to facilitate ultimately positive interactions. So let me share a little bit about what's happening in the West Zone that speaks to SEL. At Lyons Mill Elementary School, the LMES Explorers have focused on their structures and processes so that students and adults, they know what to expect when they come to Lyons Mill Elementary School, as well as they're incorporating conscious discipline into instruction. And in all staff meetings, the 3 signature practices are embedded to bring about that intentional connection towards a sense of belonging for students and adults. At Southwest Academy, they have engaged in explicit teaching of social emotional lessons during resource time to elevate individual skills, as well as utilizing restorative practices as part of mediations. This is complemented by their mentoring programs, Black Boy Joy and Genius. Lastly, I want to talk about the high school level students at Randallstown High. They're engaged in connecting to the Mind Over Matters campaign by establishing Active Minds Group. That supports mental health awareness and educating young adults towards building stronger families and communities by opening up the conversation about mental health and creating lasting change in the way mental health is talked about, cared for, and valued. We so greatly appreciate you taking the time to be with us tonight, and we invite you to join us in nurturing our children's social and emotional selves by doing a couple things. Model the way, model empathy, kindness, and let's be helpful. Find ways to give back to your community. We know this increases our own happiness. Use I statements like I feel to label those feelings versus they made me feel. What we know is it's okay to have feelings and even strong feelings. It's how we express them and then what we do with them through our actions. Ask questions. Get curious with your child. Support looking at the pros and cons because that's how we determine how decisions are making. What I will offer in conclusion is while SEL alone can't mitigate all stressors that impact us, impact our children, what we know is that it can mitigate the harmful effects of toxic stress and trauma when implemented across an instructional environment. If you think your child is experiencing stronger emotions that are making it challenging to learn, reach out to a member of your student support team, an administrator, school counselor, school social worker, psychologist. These individuals can help you to secure information and access supports for your child in the learning environment. Now we will hear from Ms. April Lewis, Executive Director of School Safety, and Dr. Michael Ford, Safety Manager.
Thank you, Ms. Mustafa, and good evening, West Zone. In addition to some of the documents already mentioned by others, the documents on this slide are foundational to the work of school safety and discipline across the system. State law provides guidance under COMAR, which we are legally bound to follow. Board policies and superintendent's rules must align with COMAR. These policies and rules include a range of activities across a continuum of prevention, intervention, and logical consequences. Some of them Dr. Williams has already described. Each situation is handled on a case-by-case basis. Zero tolerance policies, which tend to handle every case of a behavior the same, were banned during the 2014-2015 school year, and BCPS made changes to its policies and rules in alignment with MSDE mandates and COMAR. Additionally, permanent removal from school is generally not permitted. The only mandatory removal is for possession of a gun. The Comprehensive Safety Plan provides the foundation for safety. The first 3 volumes are available on the BCPS website for public viewing, while the last 5 volumes are only available to staff for safety and security reasons. The first volume provides an overview of the rest of the document, assuring stakeholders that BCPS is prepared to address a variety of emergencies, often in partnership with other county agencies, such as the Baltimore County Police Department and the Baltimore County Fire Department. The Student Handbook, which students and families receive annually, is a guide for parents and students to assure their understanding of student behavioral expectations, interventions, and consequences, as well as their rights and responsibilities. December is a perfect time for school staff and parents to review the handbook with students. You will hear from one of our Safe Schools facilitators shortly as he highlights the partnership between Baltimore County Public Schools and the Baltimore County Police Department to implement the School Resource Officer Program as well as other supports. The Guide to Safe Schools for School Resource Officers and School Administrators describes the responsibilities of each agency, including how they relate to discipline and criminal behaviors. Some staff have specific responsibilities for working in schools and/or with staff to support students. Volume 3 of the Comprehensive Safety Plan identifies a number of individuals who have roles in school safety. You've already heard about some school and central office-based staff from Dr. Zarchin. School safety managers are on call 24/7 to support schools. Dr. Ford, the school safety manager for the West Zone, is well known for his hands-on support to schools. He will share some of his responsibilities. And of course, we have many community partnerships that support the physical, social, emotional, and behavioral health of our students. Dr. Ford?
Thank you, April. Once again, I'm Dr. Ford. I'm the school safety manager for the West Zone. Just to give you a little snippet of what my job entails, I provide support to principals and administrators on all things that encompasses school safety. Some of those things, preventive measures, would be making sure school safety plans are up to date. If you're not familiar with them, those are the plans that our students and staff use. They're the roadblock to the roadmap to how they respond to emergencies in real time. One of the ways as a parent that you can assist us is following the procedures in place for parents during those emergencies. We all know we're parents too. You want to rush to the school, but sometimes that actually delays or takes away resources we have dealing with the emergency. I also provide professional development to administrators on subjects such as handling threats, updating protocols, best practices for investigations, how to handle bullying, harassment, or intimidation issues. And also in collaboration with our police partnership, we do assessments of all our buildings and schools and resolve any issues of concern. Some of the other interventions that I'm a part of is the development of safety plans for kids that might be involved in bullying, harassment, or intimidation, or they might have had a conflict. And I'll sit down with the school, the administrator, the counselor, the students, and sometimes the parents, and we'll build this safety plan in place just so the child has this tool, this reminder of how to navigate the school until this issue is fully resolved. Sometimes we help with kids that are transitioning to a comprehensive school, trying to build their self-esteem and getting used to that larger environment. And sometimes I'm just called upon to do impartial investigations and report back to our administrative structure. Safety managers pretty much work 24/7. We respond to things that's posted on the Maryland State tip line. We respond to emergencies in real time with either our fire or police partners. And we try to provide that 24-hour support to principals and the system itself. My ask is that we work collaboratively and just resolving some of the issues that our children are facing in schools. A lot of these issues actually start at home and in the community. The school just happens to be the meeting place for kids. So we need your help. We need that partnership and working through some of those issues. We're parents too. We care about the safety of the kids. We care about the safety of our family members and loved ones that work in the school system as well. So we're all in this together. We just need that collaborative effort. Call your counselor, call your school, call your SRO if you get a tip, so we can work this thing out together. Thank you for your time. I believe Captain Brown and Lieutenant Askew are up next. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Captain Brown. We're going to go over our SRO program. SRO program is in its 24th year now. It's one of the most robust and successful programs in the country. And as was said earlier, we have 83 SROs, which includes one at each high school. Some high schools have more than one. We also have an SRO at every middle school. In addition, we have an SRO at each of the 10 precincts to oversee and float between the elementary schools within that precinct. The Safe to Learn Act of 2018 requires adequate law enforcement coverage for all schools. Our program goes above and beyond that. SROs work with the school staff in helping to maintain a safe and secure learning environment for students and staff. And the role of the SRO is three-tier. It's teaching, mentoring, and law enforcement. Teaching, they teach law-related classes. Middle school SROs teach DARE, which is drug abuse resistance education. Also GREAT, which is gang resistance education and training. High school SROs are oftentimes guest speakers. They teach law-related classes, the street law curriculum, consequences of crimes, child abuse, co-teach and student government classes, social media concerns. They also co-teach with teachers on various other topics. Second tier is mentoring. Our SROs mentor students. They assist with jobs, youth academy, recruiting, cadet programs, and other resources. And of course, the third tier is law enforcement. Law enforcement in the schools and the community, building security, participate in emergency scenarios and drills, and to serve as liaisons with the schools and the precincts. Now, the Safe Schools Facilitator, which is my title, and also the Assistant Safe Schools Facilitator, which is a sergeant, we serve as a member of the steering committee, the critical incident management team, as well as the behavioral threat assessment team. Assist with drafting safety policies and protocols. We manage the SRO program and its professional development. We respond to emergency incidents in schools. We liaison with the police department and the school system to keep the information flowing. Move on to training for the SROs. In addition to what is required of every every police officer in the state by the Maryland Police Training Commission, our SROs also receive 40 hours of basic SRO state mandated training as required by the Safe to Learn Act of 2018. In addition, our SROs attend the National Association for School Resource Officers conference to receive additional training each year. SROs also participate in active shooter training, de-escalation training, respond to critical incident training, working with persons with mental illness, and other school-based training. SROs are also required to attend the annual Safe Schools Conference. SROs also receive training around equity, implicit bias, diversity and inclusion, candid conversations, fair and impartial policing, and active bystander for law enforcement. Some other activities by our SROs is they serve as coaches oftentimes after school in their own time. They sponsor other activities and are involved in many special interest groups. Now we're moving on to after hours incidents and incidents that occur during school. Safe Schools Facilitator and Assistant works with the Department of School Safety to mitigate and investigate threats during and after school to ensure the safety and security of staff and students. Oftentimes, the Baltimore County Police Department, detectives, patrol, SROs all work together in concert to investigate these incidents. These investigations take an inordinate amount of time, and threats can cause a disruption to the education environment and cause fear and anxiety amongst the school community. In addition, charges such as threats of mass violence, disturbing school activities, misuse of electronic mail, and threats on students and staff can be filed against those who are making threats. During school hours, SROs work the administrative team to maintain safety and security throughout the building. Parents are encouraged to report any incidents to police by calling 911 or to contact the SRO if school is still in session. Moving on to school crossing guards. School crossing guards are hired and managed by the police department. We have 275 morning and afternoon separate details in the entire county. When a school crossing guard is not able to be at a stop, a uniformed police officer from that precinct fills in. I'm going to pass it on now to Dr. Zarchin.
Thank you, Captain Brown. We greatly appreciate your partnership and support every day. And now we're going to move to our question and answer portion of tonight's town hall. As a reminder, members of the BCPS community had an opportunity to submit questions in advance, and we have received over 180 questions. We're going to answer as many of the questions as we can. Some of those questions will be in time as they come up in the chat box. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible. For those questions that we're unable to answer, we'll provide answers in an FAQ document that will be posted on the website in the coming weeks. And now to our first question. Our first question comes from YouTube and is for Ms. Lewis and Captain Brown. Several viewers want to know, are our children in danger if they come to school tomorrow? So I believe this is in reference to an anonymous TikTok threat that targeted all schools across the United States.
Okay, I guess I'll start. The threat came from somewhere outside of Maryland. We have investigated it. Various other jurisdictions also investigated it. And at this time, we found no merit to the threat whatsoever. So the answer is yes. I do encourage students and staff to come to school tomorrow. And unfortunately, it's another threat that we are dealing with, but this is a larger one, unfortunately, and it's getting a lot of attention.
And thank you for that, Captain Brown. And so we have provided information to our administrators and to our families to support what Captain Brown has said, that we do not believe that there is a threat for our students to be in school tomorrow. So we're looking forward to all of our students and staff attending school as they normally would tomorrow.
Thank you. Next up is a question, again for Ms. Lewis and Captain Brown. A parent asks, due to recent gun violence events in U.S. schools, what measures can BCPS take to prevent such tragedies? For example, can extra security such as metal detection be installed at the school gates? What does the school system do to ensure something like that doesn't happen here?
So thank you for that question, Dr. Zarchin. And from time to time, the question about metal detectors does come up. Our approach to school safety is a comprehensive one that has to balance various hardening strategies with creating educationally friendly learning environments. And so a metal detector only provides some control over the entrance at which it is placed. Our buildings have multiple entrances, and so each metal detector requires multiple staff, sometimes up to 4 people, to participate in screening and searching. And so these are 4 people who can no longer actively monitor other parts of the building, including outside or other doors, or leave their posts if something happens elsewhere in the building or outside. There are also some studies that have shown high fail rates of metal detectors, even at airports, and we don't want people to develop a false sense of security, even in having them, and become less vigilant about other safety protocols. Using metal detectors also has the potential to create a significant delay in getting our students into buildings the size of our high schools and middle schools. And so you would have students standing in long lines for long periods of time. And there are some concerns that they would then be vulnerable to threats on the outside of the building. And there are also some studies that have shown that students feel less safe when metal detectors are in place because their perception of danger increases. All of our high schools, as Captain Brown shared with you, have at least one SRO. Our middle schools have at least one, and they're working in partnership with the administrative team, along with the continuum of prevention and intervention procedures. And so when there is a reasonable suspicion that a student has a weapon, a search is conducted. And much of the work, I think if you've heard before, is about establishing relationships with students and encouraging them to report any concerns they have with safety. But we do continue to consider all options for keeping our students safe. Captain Brown, would you like to add to that?
Yes. Fortunately, in Baltimore County, we have a unique relationship that our police are police officers first and foremost. So they were all police officers on the street. They work in the respective precinct where they're assigned. So the relationship with detectives, with everyone else who supports the school is seamless. So what happens is our relationship is such that if something happens in the community and it affects the schools, we're on top of it right away. If there's someone involved and it could spill over, we are on top of it. If it's an incident where we find out if they're students, could there be a problem tomorrow? Should we keep people separated? Should we send someone not go to school? Depending on whether somebody's charged or not. And at some point, someone will get out of school if they're incarcerated. So we're going to have to make sure that measures are taken place to ensure that it's safe once they do return to school, if that happens. And part of that threat assessment does involve our SROs, does involve various people in the BCPS system. So fortunately, we have a unique system where we have police officers that have been doing this for so long that it works so well. So I'm confident that we're in very good shape as compared to some other jurisdictions.
Thank you for that response. The next question is for Ms. Lewis, Dr. Ford, and our executive directors. Why are students and parents that repeatedly are not following handbook policy and disrupt the learning environment in BCPS not held accountable for their actions?
So I can start with that one. I believe they are held accountable. One of the things that we do is we issue warning letters and no trespass letters to parents who simply don't want to follow BCPS policies. It's not an immediate go-to. We try to talk to them and work with them first, but we do have those measures in place so that schoolhouse is not disrupted and it remains safe.
And I'll just start for the student aspect. We have done the warnings. We've done the restorative practice. That was first quarter. Now we're in second quarter, and we have moved to the school suspension side. Those are local. We have some for board suspensions, especially for these threats that are coming through, and we have evidence that the students are posting these threats. So we have implemented those things, and we have had some instances where we have had to move to something that is long term. And so it has been very specific, but now that we are into the second quarter, one thing that I will say for parents and the parents that are listening, we're really past that warning stage. I know that we've talked a lot about just a community conference and in those pieces. But what we are dealing with, and just in the past 24 hours, we are putting those structures in place, but it definitely takes the community effort. Everything that has been successful has been those situations where parents have let us know things, used the tip line, called the administrator, where students have gone to the SROs directly. And so it is going to be a community approach as we navigate through these times.
I don't have anything additional to add to that one. I think Dr. Ford and Ms. Joseph have covered that.
Great, thank you very much. So Ms. Joseph and Dr. Ford, can you please address this next question? How is the school system prepared to provide a safe environment for those students wanting to learn when there seem to be no control in reference to outbursts, classroom disruptions, bullying of younger students, vandalism of school property that affects all students, lack of resources to allow students to safely change classes and be dismissed without physical and verbal harassment?
And I will go first. The first thing that we are doing, and I want to make sure I'm clear with this, the behaviors that we're seeing is not coming from all students. Typically, we see it from about 8 to 10% of our students. This year is coming from about 20 to 25% of the students. So what we are doing with making sure that those students who are coming prepared to learn is, number one, we are not removing privileges and removing some of our after-school activities, because we believe that engagement is important, either through athletics, again, all of our after-school events, so that they're able to do that. Multiple schools celebrated our honor roll activities this week. So we're continuing to do that. We are addressing each of the individual students, really how they're bringing their behavior to us. We have to differentiate our approach. Sometimes it's just the student, but quite honestly, sometimes the approach is the behaviors of adults who are encouraging the behavior along with the student, which becomes a community event. And that's where we have to use that, where we're using our community partners that's there. And so we are dealing with some of those extreme behaviors there for some of those specific students. And then some of the behaviors that we're seeing is just students who are following. And so we're trying to get those students to be leaders and actually engage them in other ways through our activities in schools. And I would encourage parents for you to get your students, if they are not involved in a school activity, some type of engagement activity after school is very important. Dr. Ford?
So this last year has been a strain on everyone. And we're seeing behaviors out of kids that miss that year of that natural development that happens when they are in person and with their peers. So they've had that whole year where their communication was nothing else but social media. Social media is tearing our kids apart. We don't control social media. Social media starts in your home when you give that child that cell phone and you're not monitoring as much as you think you are what they're involved in. So all of that behavior that's happening on social media, they bring that energy to school. So if the 7-Eleven was the meeting place, if the church was the meeting place, if the skating rink was the meeting place where kids gather, that's where that behavior is going to come out. It just so happens to be the schoolhouse. So we need your help, your assistance in monitoring your child at home, sharing that information with the school staff, the counselors, myself, the SROs, so we can prevent some of those issues from boiling over in school. You hear about a third, 5% of the things that happen in school. You never hear about the things that were prevented because we had parents or kids come in and share that information, so we got to it before it happens. It's just the way our society is working right now. And it's like everything, news, media, it's just negative, right? So you hear about the negative, but you never hear about the positive things. Like you can go on YouTube now and see the clip of the story that was done about the mentoring of the SROs from Woodlawn High School. You know, when we had the civil unrest, we had over 30 students from Milford Mill High School ask for a meeting with Miss Joseph, who was the principal then, if they could sit down and meet privately with the SROs about how to interact with patrol officers on the street. It was a tear-jerking moment because they trusted the SROs enough to have that private and candid conversation. So in a lot of places, we have these beautiful relationships where we're working together, parent and employee and parent, that you just don't get to hear about. But it's happening every day. But we need your help in dealing with that 5%, that 25% that we're seeing this year, to get back to where we were and then blossom from there.
And I will also add, and I've been in the community a long time. I'm a BCPS parent. We encourage you to join the PTSA. And I know that a lot of the parents on the call are ones who are fully engaged. We need your continued engagement. We are not going to have all of the answers. We can only get through this by coming together as a community. Coming together as a community. And so as I've been around, I've been talking with students, like just themselves. And so a lot of them, you know, are saying that they want some of the focus on some of those other things that we discussed, because right now our children's attention are being pulled, like Dr. Ford said, with that social media. We have to pull it back in some other positive things. And that's why, again, our schools are working hard to make sure that we implemented all of those after school activities back in whatever your child is interested in. You've got to get them engaged in something to divert that attention for that negative behavior. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So we have another question from YouTube, and I'd like to call Ms. Lewis back for this question. A viewer wants to know, what actions is BCPS taking to change their policies to address behavior issues in school? They specifically want us to discuss BCPS actions, not the role of parents.
So just in terms of the policies that are in place, it's not necessarily that any policies need to be changed, but we do need to look at how those policies are implemented in the school, especially at the level of the schoolhouse. And I think Ms. Joseph just referenced the fact that, you know, we've had some time now for students to get acclimated to school. I think there's been a great deal of grace given, but, and as Dr. Williams said earlier, principals have the options now of looking at a variety of consequences to address behavior. And so we continue with that communication of expectations, and that's something that we do, holding students accountable with the logical consequences, and then also looking at ways to create community, because again, in most cases, those students are coming back. And so how do we reintegrate them into schools? And what are the protections that we put in place for students as other students are experiencing the challenging behaviors? And Dr. Ford referenced the safety plans that we have developed for students in some cases. So there aren't necessarily new policies and rules, but we're looking at how we're supporting schools and making sure that they're able to implement whatever the consequences are that need to be implemented to make sure that there are changes in student behaviors. And I don't know if some of the EDs might want to add to that as they're working directly in schools on a daily basis with principals.
So as you're coming back, we have a follow-up to that as well that I'd like our EDs to respond to. A viewer on YouTube says, I understand we need community help, but the families that need to hear this are not the ones watching. What are we doing to increase their involvement?
I can start with from the elementary perspective, because I do think there's different things that we do with elementary school parents that are a little bit different than our secondary parents. However, similarly, when we talk about engaging parents through mechanisms that are preferred by their students. So for example, a lot of our elementary schools were hosting very modified but winter concerts. Parents enjoy seeing their children perform. That is a great way for us to get parents to participate and engage with the school in something that's positive, where we then can also have those face-to-face conversations with parents as school administrators. A lot is being done in some of our schools with required parent conferences. If parents aren't responsive to them, then the pupil personnel workers are often working with our school administrators in order to facilitate those meetings. Virtual has provided some benefits with allowing us to have additional conferences and meeting structures with parents, but schools work very individually to provide and engage specific parents within the schools.
I also want to follow up with something Ms. Joseph said, the involvement of the PTA. And just being a part for us in the elementary level is the Parent-Teacher Association. We don't have the students involved, but having the teachers involved with the parents and the community really helps to foster some of those relationships. And so the more we can get people to come to those events, here and support the schools, I believe that's a good opportunity. We also know there are events in your communities, things that happen in your own communities where you might go at your church, your local church, or even at the 7-Eleven, wherever you see people that congregate that may go and be a part of your school community. I think it's important that we share the information, that we say, you know, the school's here to support. How can the school support you? What do you need from the school? We have a lot of resources at the school level that can support parents, students, community members. And so really helping and having that support and reaching out to the schools will really be important as we continue to build the relationships.
And I would just like to add some of the off-the-record things that are happening. Our principals are going to our faith-based organizations to talk with parents. Sometimes a lot of our principals and staff live in the area, and so some parents aren't comfortable and they have a direct relationship. I also want to put out there that some of our students are not living with parents. They're living with grandparents. They are agency placed, and so we work with social workers, and we have to change our dynamic and our approach on what participation means. Some of our parents are working, and so we're using all of those different strategies, and we know that we're in a difficult time, and so we are just trying to be creative and out of the box for making sure that we engage them. But we had, again, I know the YouTube comment is that I keep saying that because that's what I believe. You don't do this isolated. You don't do this with just one action on the school side without a community support and without the parent support. There has not been any successful community that has not engaged that way. And so if I keep saying that, it is because that's what I believe.
And a lot of communities also have one or two people that they go to. And so that might be an advocate that may be able to speak on your behalf. And a lot of our families that are coming from different countries feel comfortable going to one or two people in the community to advocate for them. And so that's another thing we want to encourage. If a person does not have the wherewithal, they may not feel comfortable going to the school, then there's an advocate. There's somebody in your community, your church, someone in your community center that can actually speak on your behalf, that can then go back to the school and then work with the school and then get some resources to support you as well.
Thank you for your responses. Ms. Mustafer, we have a question that was submitted by a staff member. It states, as an elementary school teacher, I have called for mental health support for students engaging in disturbing behavior and/or conversation, and the students were returned to my class less than an hour later. This is a concerning practice given what just happened with the school shooting in Michigan. What changes can be made to the current policy? Can a mental health evaluation be required before the student can return to school, especially if this is a chronic issue?
So I'll reiterate a little bit of what Ms. Lewis highlighted, which is the policies as they're written have processes and procedures that we flow throughout our school day in managing student behavior. So I applaud teachers, staff, anyone who's recognizing there's a student that needs support. One of the things to recognize is that a lot of times for our students, and especially now as we have been out of practice with school and the routines of school, is that behavior a lot of time is it's communication. Long before that student enters your classroom, as a matter of fact, right before that student enters your classroom, it's making those connections. You just heard our executive director speak to that community outreach piece. It's really important to have that communication with the parents. It's really important to know your students as well. And that through that communication, welcoming students in, creating that sense of connection and that belonging, elevating student voice, sometimes you can mitigate extreme behaviors before they occur. The other thing that I will elevate and say is that, you know, stressing relationships, it's super important. But talking about challenging or strong emotions during times that are low stress, no stress, are also really important. Hence why SEL and social emotional learning, embedding it into the instructional environment is super important. And if you're wondering how to do that, make sure you're extending to your student support team that can really support you in bringing in, if it's elementary schools, increasing your conscious discipline practices, at the secondary schools, the continuum of restorative practices. The other thing is in speaking to what assessments can occur or do occur. So there's a range of student behavior, and sometimes student behavior increases and students come out of the classroom. We're called for support. We meet with the student, we talk with the student de-escalates, and we support the student in returning and come push into the classroom sometimes. However, there are times that students express themselves in ways that are potentially harmful to themselves or others. And that can result in an assessment with a mental health professional who's in your building to really consider what is happening, what's the intent, and what's the means to any access or any weapons or anything of that nature where they could potentially do harm. And that takes a different pathway when there is a finding that there's serious threat of harm, where we work to have the student seen and work with families, work with the community. So just in summation, it's starting with relationships, and then recognizing the signs and symptoms, but also working with our student support teams to support us in structures and resources as well.
Thank you. Don't go anywhere just yet. As follow-up to that question, a viewer on YouTube wants to know if we have social workers and counselors at all BCPS schools.
We would like that, and I'm really excited to say that you know, we would like that, and Dr. Williams has put forward a budget to ask for increased staffing in that area. At all BCPS schools, we do have school counselors. We do not have school social workers at all schools, but we are working towards that. Sometimes if a student is in need of that intensive level of service from a school social worker, schools will reach out to our office, and we will explore the need for services and work with the school, work with the parent, and work with the school team to identify resources that meet the students' needs.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lewis and any one of our EDs, this next question is for you. A parent asks, not only are student behaviors a concern in schools, but also on the buses. There's a real safety concern while transporting students. Will students and parents be held more accountable to help change the rising culture of violent and disruptive behavior, both in schools and on the school buses?
So I'll start by saying school buses are an extension of school. And so as we look at our expectations for student behavior, it's not just about what happens in the schoolhouse, but also what happens on school buses and what happens as students are participating in school activities. So there's really no difference in holding students accountable for those behaviors that occur on the buses. Now, schools have some different kinds of things at their discretion in terms of dealing with behavior on student buses, and some of the EDs can elaborate on what those are. But the expectation is that students behave appropriately on school buses as well as in the school building.
I think one thing that Ms. Joseph spoke of before was really looking at the first quarter of school year, was really providing a lot of instruction and support to students. And then there's an expectation of learning certain behaviors and adhering to them and following them. That doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to teach and support students with them. However, at the same time, there is an expectation. So some of our elementary schools had a bus at the school during the school day. Students practiced boarding the bus, sitting in assigned seats, deboarding the bus, lining up, going back in the school. Some of our schools had parents come and get on the bus to see the structure of the bus, to see the expectation of assigned seats, of how students are expected to board a bus and to get off a bus. We have schools that are using bus contracts to again reiterate the expectations for bus behavior with students. And when necessary, and if things are dangerous and unsafe, students will be suspended from the bus. That does not mean they're necessarily suspended from school. The expectation is that the parent or a guardian family member is transporting them to or from school. We understand that this creates a challenge for families. However, we also know that the transportation to and from school for all of our students to arrive safely and go home safely is of the utmost importance of every single parent. And so we will and have instituted bus suspensions as warranted.
Thank you. And a question is for follow-up is, do we have cameras on our buses?
Yes, we do. One of the things I wanted to say, just recently I had an incident that was brought to my attention as the ED, and I worked very closely with a principal to go look at some camera footage to see exactly what happened. So I do know that that's something that they do use. If there are incidents on the bus that they need to follow up on, they work very closely with the bus driver and the transportation department. So if those are things that need to happen, cameras can be reviewed and footage can be looked at as well.
Thank you. Appreciate the response. Our next question is for Captain Brown. A parent wants to know what can be done for school resource officers as they try to build relationships with all students in our schools.
Okay. Well, one of the important things our SROs do is mentor. So that's about building relationships. It's about, some of the SROs are sometimes father figures or mother figures to some of the students. That's not uncommon. Unfortunately, the last year was challenging because the SROs weren't necessarily with the students. They have been back with the students, but of course, unfortunately, there's a lot going on that's distracting our SROs at times as well. The things we do that I mentioned earlier, the SROs do is coach. They also, a lot of students rely on them for private conversations, things that they don't feel comfortable telling others, to be the intermediary in certain issues. And also the SROs attend, some type of like assemblies, things like of that nature, which I believe are starting up in some schools. So unfortunately, some of the SROs are distracted, but our SROs are special people that really have a knack for connecting. And I will say any of the students who want to approach the SRO should do so, because these SROs are in these schools for a reason, because they're good at their jobs. So it's going to get more and more easier as things open up more and more with assemblies and some of this, the threats and some other things calm down. So that's my answer.
Thank you very much for that answer. Ms. Mustafer, we have another question for you from YouTube. What evidence exists that SEL works on kids that don't care and continue to exhibit persistent behavior problems?
So there's a great deal of work that that comes, if you look at CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, as well as you look at Dr. Mark Brackett out of Yale University. When you talk about students and their motivation, it's really about us drilling down on what's getting in the way. And so sometimes, as we talked about earlier in the tiered system of supports, when you think about students who we perceive that aren't motivated, we really have to drill down and we really have to examine and get curious about why a student may or may not be engaging, why we perceive that they may or may not be motivated. There are many reasons that students display the behaviors and communicate in the way that they do. And so spending time with the student trying to figure that out elevates in that tiered system of support. So we talked about earlier, SEL is tiered, and at that universal skill tier 1, there's that building of skills, really trying to build that awareness, build those connections, which ultimately we want students to feel safe, we want them to feel connected, and we want them to have a predictable environment. And so at that level, we're building skills, we're working directly with students. And then we go to tier 2, which is small group. And sometimes that's additional skill training, referrals, as we talked about, small group mentoring. And when students aren't responsive there, we move to that tier 3, and that's at times can be individualized intervention. When you talk about students and their lack of motivation, it's really drilling down on the root cause of that motivation and then working through that within a tiered system of support to find out what are the students' needs and how can we best meet those with the resources that we have. And if we don't have those resources, what can we do to extend to our community partners to wrap around students so that they can increase their access and connect with their motivating factors. I heard many of us talk earlier about the fact of find out what your children like, get them to explore, get them to be curious. One of the things I will offer to you as a parent myself, many times our children, they don't want to fail. They want to be super successful. They want us to celebrate them. And we do, and we're always looking for that opportunity. But one of the things that we have to really share with our students is that level of awareness and the fact that in our relationships as parents, as teachers, as staff, as executive directors and SROs, we're going to be there, success or failure. And so we want students to continue to be motivated, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And so we have to drill down, find the root cause, and figure out which supports would best serve to support a student in finding their passion in their learning.
Thank you, Ms. Mustafer. Captain Brown and Dr. Ford, we'd like you to address this next question. What is the protocol for BCPS to handle social media threats? Please be specific in your answer, as it's expected there's a standard operating procedure.
So Cap, I can start a little bit. When we get a hold of social media threats and we get them from all different ways. And usually it's children that share because they're concerned, which we applaud them for that. Sometimes the tips come from parents or it comes from the tip line. So as one of the school safety managers, let's say a principal gives me a call and shares that a tip was shared from a student. I gather that information. I share it with the BCOPD liaison. The SROs are usually already beginning the investigation from the school level. We collaborate and put all that information together, and then our police partners do their things behind the magic window, and we search this out until we find out where that source came from. Here's the thing. Here's the important part of this. You really need to have conversations with your kids. Because some kids think it's funny, it's lighthearted to post these things. I'm shooting up to school tomorrow, and they laugh it off. But they don't realize that regardless of what time this information was posted, the school side, the police side, we're working this information through the wee hours of the night and the morning. And our police partners will come knock on your door at 2, 3, and 4 in the morning to question you and your kids about that particular post. Sometimes it might be mobile crisis coming. There could be school consequences and also police charges that come along with that jokingly, let me post this. So once again, this is where we need you as parents to monitor their social media and have those conversations about how this will follow them. You hear now about kids that are applying for colleges and jobs, and employers are now looking at their social media history. These things kind of stick with you. They don't go away. So this false narrative that kids have thinking, I can use this app to spoof my image or my IP address, it doesn't work. Captain Brown, you want to add?
Yes, because the relationship is such, a lot of times things happen after hours. So it's not uncommon to have something happen 7 o'clock at night, 1 in the morning, and we do our part to try to get it solved and run down whatever we can before schools open to see what we can get to. Unfortunately, this year we're up to over 75 of these. So we're unfortunately, we are very, very good at these investigations because we deal with them so often, unfortunately, this year especially. But we handle the investigation. It's a police investigation. We will interview. We will, get photos of people. We will bring in detectives to do some checking through IP addresses if it's where it's coming from. We will interview people at houses at night. We will conduct searches at times. And just this week alone, we have charged a few people with this crime related to these incidents, in addition to someone else for falsely reporting something. So we are on top of these. We have 10 precincts working together, and everybody's on the same page. We also get intelligence involved sometimes to run down things for us. But in addition, part of this is we when it starts up to when it ends, there is some type of threat assessment that's conducted by the schools with our assistants to see what has to be done right now while we're running this down and what has to be done now that we've solved it or we have someone responsible. And then, of course, we figure out, should this person be brought back to school? How are they held accountable? Not only is there a charge that can be assessed from us, but also some type of school sanction as well. So we're very good at this, and we have counselors as well that assist with this if there's some other issues going on that come out of the investigation that we didn't intend on.
Thank you, Dr. Ford and Captain Brown. Speaking of social media, Ms. Joseph, we are receiving a number of questions on YouTube about an incident that occurred at one of our middle schools, Sudbrook Middle School, involving threats that were posted on social media. Can you talk through how executive directors support school leaders in response to such incidents where a school has to go into lockout and dismissal may be delayed due to an ongoing investigation? Do we know if this situation has been fully resolved is what a parent is asking. Actually, we've got several questions about this.
Yes, thank you for the question. There are some details I cannot go over, but what I can go over is that we did have a social media threat. We immediately contacted, our SRO was there, and the police department took over the matter. We did use our safety protocol, and because of the outstanding work of our police department, they were able to ensure that the area was clear, and we all went home safely that day. And so for that matter, it is still ongoing investigation. There were individuals who have been arrested, and the police are taking over. And so, again, that coordinated effort is one example of how it works to make sure that the building, our students, and our staff are safe.
Thank you. And Captain Brown, can you talk about, one of the questions we often get is, why isn't information out sooner? And I know that there are times where we have to withhold information. Can you speak to a perceived delay or why there is that delay when we have serious situations? Captain Brown?
Okay. Yes. Well, okay. we do get the information out, and sometimes the schools do. I believe maybe we can be a little more consistent. That is fair to say. We have quite a few incidents that rise to the level where I can see that a lot of people do want to know what's going on. A lot of times we really can't give information. We don't have it. You know, we're in the middle of the investigation, and, you know, sometimes it's not applicable to stop what we're doing to give what little, if any, information we have. Fortunately, you know, these oftentimes do get solved, you know, in an hour. Sometimes it takes a day or two. So we do communicate some of the incidents that are larger, but it's important to note that we have so many incidents that do not make the news, that do not make, so, you know, other than social media, and we run them down and we kind of move on, and we charge where appropriate. So like I said, we can maybe be more consistent and in some of the larger incidents. And I believe yesterday there was a social media or a media post from our department regarding the Sudbrook that did communicate what was going on. So I'm happy to say that that was at least sent out.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mustafer, we have a parent questioning what school-wide programs have been put in place to help students reintegrate into group settings after a year of being isolated. The parent asks, I feel that the aggression I'm seeing in our halls due to students not coping well being back in school, and I'd like to see large-scale programs to address this need. Can you respond to the parent's question?
Sure, thank you for the question. What I will offer is that when students returned, we actually offered a document I referenced earlier, which was Connecting as a Collective Community. And that document you can access on the Department of Social Emotional Support's website. That document included ways that we transitioned back into the environment. It's critically important that we make sure that we're explicitly teaching our routines and structures, but also what are our expectations and what is that going to look like? Through this communication, we offer students that sense of connection, but we also offer that safety and predictability that they can anticipate what's coming next. So that is one element that we put into place. We also offered information around the 3 signature practices, 3 SEL signature practices that we have embedded into the instructional environment. So that also can be referenced and found there. In addition, for our elementary school children, we have conscious discipline that's embedded in the curriculum and actually partnered with health education as well. And that at the secondary level, we're really engaging with the 3 signature practices, but also building out with the continuum of restorative practices. You know, there are many behaviors that we do see, and I think the biggest thing is we are out of practice. So continuing to reinforce, even continuing to refresh, draw out those expectations at every corner is really something that we do encourage on an ongoing basis. We have to keep in mind, we have been out of school for 2 years, essentially roughly 2 years. And so getting students to practice and grow into the development as to how they navigate the structures of their schools is really important.
Thank you very much. And for the next question, I'm going to ask that our executive directors come back. But as they're coming on, I think, Ms. Joseph, I may have cut you off before you had an opportunity to share about Sudbrook. So I want to get back to you and apologize for that.
Oh, no worries. I just wanted to add that our families also received a communication from the principal on the Sudbrook incident, and there were additional supports for staff and students today.
Thank you for that. And while we've got our executive directors up, a parent wants to know if Baltimore County Public Schools has considered expanding its alternative school options, including increased capacity at its alternative schools, such as Rosedale, to accommodate students who would benefit from extra supports. They believe there is an increased need for alternative school seats, and students identified as possibly benefiting from an alternative school setting are often unable to attend due to lack of seats.
Okay, I can take that. For our alternative schools, our alternative schools on the west side would be Meadowwood and Catonsville Alternative, and we have been using them, and we are looking at other ways to use them, not just for disciplinary reasons, but we actually use them for times where students could benefit from a smaller setting and more resources, and they have been doing an outstanding job. And so we are constantly looking for ways on how we can expand that support on the West Zone. So yes, absolutely. And those schools and those school leaders and teachers are doing a phenomenal job in their work with their supports that they're offering for our zone.
And we know that at the elementary level, we do not have an alternative school environment. We are working with administrators as well as cross-divisionally through the school system to ensure that students who need a different level of support within the school setting are provided that in a different type of environment. It may not be in an alternate school, but in an alternate environment or learning situation. We do understand that there are students who need additional levels of support, and while we're working to put those in place, we also know that other students deserve, a safe and secure learning environment. So we are working with our administrators in those circumstances at the elementary level, as well as across divisions within the school system to ensure those supports.
Thank you. So our next question is for Captain Brown. Captain Brown, a viewer on YouTube is asking, what are our SROs and Baltimore County Police Department doing to address potential gang recruitment in schools?
Okay. First of all, and I guess I'm going to talk about relationships again, knowing who's in your school, knowing who's walking the hallways, and having an understanding of what's going on in the school is key. Understanding what gang activity looks like. Also, they teach the gang classes in the middle school. So some of the students already understand that, and many are comfortable coming to the SROs. But again, when gang activity is seen, it's something that we investigate. We have gang detectives. We have local detectives, because we did have it at one of our schools where we were suspecting some gang activity on the west side about a year or so ago. And we were able to have some detectives move in to calm some of the efforts, because it was some recruiting going on, and it was, or possible recruiting, and also some criminal behavior as well. So we have a lot of things in place, but at the end of the day, it's about relationships with the students, and also the administrators telling us what they're seeing as well, so we can all work together to see that it doesn't happen in our schools.
Thank you very much. So we have another question that I'd like to pose to our executive directors. A parent wants to know if we can enforce uniforms at county schools.
I'll take a little bit of it for elementary school. I do have at least one of my schools that I support that has uniforms. And they went through a whole process where they really did an outreach to the community, and they felt as though that's something that would really benefit their community. They're a Title I school, so some of the funding comes from the federal government. And so they really did an outstanding job of going into the community, surveying the community, and then coming back to see exactly what that looks like. So I know that there are schools. I know I support one, and I'm not sure if anyone else does, but I do know that there are some middle schools that also do that. Making the mandate, that's something that we would have to look into, but I do know that there is a process, and some of the schools have gone through that process so far as to what that looks like, and it has worked for the schools in particular, and I think they really enjoy and know that that's one less thing they have to worry about when it's time to come back to school, would be a selection of clothes. They just need to get one type of pants or top so the students can use. Ms. DiDonato or Ms. Joseph?
Yep, and I'll just say for the secondaries, really on my middle school level, none of the high schools have that. And we followed a similar process. There was kind of a survey done with the community and the parents, and they really chose the colors working with the school. And so that is the process that's there. When we were coming back in, several of the schools kind of sent something back out to make sure that this was something that the schoolhouse and community still wanted to do, and that is in place. So that is the process that we have followed.
Thank you very much. So our next question comes from YouTube. A viewer says, we have witnessed an unprecedented increase in mental health issues in our students over the past year. How can BCPS confidently say the recent TikTok will not influence a struggling student to act? Ms. Mustapher or Dr. Ford, would you like to get us started?
Sure, I'll start. I don't think we can say that it won't influence them. We're just hoping that between the school resources and the family resources, that we can work with that student to prevent that student from acting on these TikTok challenges. That's why I go back to the importance of family members monitoring their social media, having those conversations about what their child is viewing and what they're into. If the school is not made aware of things, we don't know until those things happen. So the earlier we can find out about them, the earlier we can work in collaboration with you to help your child. Ms. Mustapher?
Yes, the one thing I would add to that, Dr. Ford, is that I think we have to create space for these conversations. So we have to make sure that our students recognize who their resources are and offer that space so that when things like this prevail, we talked about earlier, low stress, no stress. During those times of making connections, we need to make sure that we offer those resources. So when there is stress, when there is challenge, when there is a concern, they know who to go to and they know who to speak with. It's critically important.
And may I just add, just from the executive director view, when we see these increases that are needed, we deploy staff out. So like tomorrow, we plan to be out in our school. And so not just in the office, we help with lunch duty, bus duty, those types of things to make sure that students see more adult presence that's there. And so that's another support that we put in place when we see an increase in these types of threats that are coming through.
Ms. Lewis?
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'd like to add, in addition, encouraging students to talk and talk to the right people, because what we've seen in many cases of school shootings, students have talked, but they've talked to other students who then either just stayed away from the area or kept it to themselves or talked to the student themselves, rather than going to adults who are able to provide the intervention that is needed. So it's important that we're hearing this, that parents are asking their children, have you heard anything? And if they have, about a student who might be intending to carry out a behavior such as was described in the TikTok challenge, that they're bringing that information to school staff, to the SRO, not to another student.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. So we're on to our last question, and I want to open this one up to any one of our presenters. Dr. Williams' email on December 3rd listed numerous ideas that were reliant on BCPS current resources and staffing to improve safety. What are we doing to leverage community resources external to BCPS? This problem is much bigger than the schoolhouse.
And I think we've heard a lot tonight about our partnership with the Baltimore County Police Department. So that's one area, and so they are external to us, and that is one of the resources that we use in terms of supporting our students. Prior to the school year, we met with our SROs. We talked to them about how we thought our students might be different coming back to us, helping them to understand what the expected behaviors might be and how they can support support students in getting reacclimated to being in school. So that's one partner you've heard a lot from tonight that we use through our Department of School Safety.
With respect to social emotional wellness and mental health resources, we've expanded our partnerships with our community partners and serve in partnership with behavioral health. So continue to cultivate those relationships, but expanding using our funding sources to make sure that students are getting their needs met with respect to the range of mental health needs.
Thank you. So before we wrap up, I want to provide Dr. Williams with an opportunity to share any closing remarks. Dr. Williams?
So thank you, Dr. Zarchin. I just want to circle back to that last question. Just today, I've had conversations with our county executive because he too, as a former educator, has been looking at what's been happening throughout the county, throughout the state, as well as what's happening in the school system. And so as we come together, the county government and the Baltimore County Public Schools come together, we're collaborating about how we're looking at needs of our community and looking at how we can partner and provide additional supports, not only within our community, but in our schools. Today, we sent out another message to Team BCPS, as it was shared, about that partnership with our Baltimore County Police, as well as conversations with our board. We are going to continue to explore ways in which to help our students, but also address any inappropriate behavior. And next month, we're hoping to get together with other systems, because this is happening across school systems, to talk about additional relevant practices that we may be able to bring into our school. And in January, I will be presenting my FY23 budget proposal to the board regarding what we may need in terms of staffing to support our students as well as our staff. So this is not the last conversation. We look forward to continue to partner with our schools, the leaders of our schools and our communities as we try to support our students. As it was shared earlier, we're now in second quarter. There's the expectation that we move to get reacclimated back to school and making some better choices. And again, the social media is becoming a little out of hand, and we appreciate the parents participating tonight, and that our principals will be reaching out and working with their PTSA leadership to communicate with additional families and communities to really get folks to know it is a partnership. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Zarchin.
Thank you, Dr. Williams, and we want to thank you for your leadership. I also want to thank our presenters, some of whom have been with us 3 nights this week. We hope that you found this informative and useful. We appreciate you joining us. As a reminder, these virtual town hall conversations are just one step in our ongoing efforts. As Dr. Williams shared in his December 3rd message to the community, there are a number of actions and opportunities that we're taking to partner with the BCPS community to ensure that our schools can focus on teaching and learning. Just to name a few: deployment of central office staff to schools to address identified needs, provide enhanced adult presence to help ensure safe and supportive environments, the use of alternative education options for students in need of additional support. School staff will work with families to create responsive solutions to meet the needs of each and every one of our students. The BCPS Student Council is launching a system-wide mental health awareness campaign that's happening this month. They will be partnering with the Maryland Center for School Safety for a See It, Hear It, and Report It campaign that will begin in January. The Parent Teacher Association Council of Baltimore County will be meeting in January to share resources with all local PTA presidents, focused on the important role of community in the working with school districts to build safe and supportive learning environments. Local PTSAs will host school-specific meetings that focus on safety. We will bring together leaders, as Dr. Williams mentioned, teachers, support professionals, community partners for a multi-district roundtable session. Participants will collaborate and work together in January to identify innovative solutions. We invite you to participate in as many of the upcoming activities as possible. Please continue to work directly with your school leadership teams to collaborate on positive solutions for the school community. Our partnership is critical during these challenging times. Thank you once again for your ongoing support. Have a great evening.